Welcome to Weather and Ag in Focus on this Monday, first Monday in August 3rd, 2026. Temperatures outside varying from the 60s with rain continuing in the Northern Valley. Still raining around the Grand Forks area up towards Thief River. Those areas have picked up 1 to 2.5 inches of rain. That's right. There's a cold front to our north, and we're getting these showers and storms to kind of train along that front. Now, that front will be pushing into our area in the Southern Valley and into Lakes Country as we head into the evening, and hopefully giving us some much needed rainfall across our area. But with that, assuming we see enough sunshine here in the Central and Southern Valley, which I do believe we will, because looking out west, there are clearing skies. So that will destabilize the atmosphere and put us in better conditions for severe storms, at least a possibility of it, from about 6 o'clock through about 10 o'clock tonight. I'm Chief Meteorologist Dean Wysocki, along with our Ag Director, Bridgette Readel. And Bridgette, it's so variable across the area in terms of, like we said last week, Castleton picking up 1 to 2 inches of rain. I drove down to Leonard over the weekend for a golf tournament, and some water in the ditches on the way down there. One side of the road, the corn was shot, and then other side of the road, it looked just fine.
Might have had irrigation.
Exactly.
Yep.
Yeah.
But
big difference.
Big difference in soil types, too, right? Because if you've got something that's more sandy, even from one side of the road to the other, and they're drying out much faster versus something with more clay and more water holding capacity, that's going to make a difference. Some hybrids, particularly as we think about corn, can have more drought tolerance, so that can help. I'm not sure if I should be thankful for the roughly 20 drops of rain we got this morning at my house.
That's about it, right?
Barely made the rain gauge wet. In fact, I have an agronomist friend who went to go check his rain gauge last week, and a bird had built a nest in it.
Oh, jeez, so that's dry.
That's dry. It's not going well.
You should have got a picture. You should have had him send a picture of that.
He did. We got lots of them floating around.
Okay,
Yes.
all right.
Yep, there's quite a few. So,
yikes.
Yeah, it's been a big change in what our weather has done as of late. And there's multiple places that would certainly want rain. I would tell you that last Thursday, coming back from Ag PhD Field Day in Baltic, South Dakota, I have never driven through a downpour near Sisseton as hard as I drove through that Thursday. At that point, I was pretty locked in, just trying to watch the white lines. And I was driving my husband's pickup, and he had to run the lights and everything else because I hadn't driven this one before. It's new. And I didn't know where any of the buttons were, and I didn't have the time to take my eyes off the road from the rain in order to keep that thing going. And that's an area that saw anywhere from 6 to 11 inches of rainfall in localized spots.
Crazy, isn't it?
Yeah, it was nuts.
Too much of a good thing. And we do have some rain in our area as we head into the evening hours, like I said. Now, the models did not forecast the 1 to 3 inches to our north. That's what happens when you get thunderstorms that train over the same area. Could that happen as that front moves southward towards the FM area? About a 20% chance that happens, but I do see us getting about 1/4 to 1/2 inch of rain, assuming these storms develop, which I think they will. And again, that's between about 6 o'clock and 10 o'clock tonight. But until then, we're looking at partly cloudy skies for the rest of the afternoon in the FM area and points southward, with highs in the 80s and winds out of the south at 10 to 20, only in the 60s and 70s today in the Northern Valley. So much different to our north. Then as we head into tonight, we're looking at those storms this evening between about 6 o'clock and 10 o'clock. Some of those could be severe. And temperatures dropping off overnight into the upper 50s. And tomorrow, it's going to be, let's give the air conditioner a rest, as long as you don't have bad allergies, with temperatures in the low 70s tomorrow and winds out of the west at about 10 to 20. So a refreshing change tomorrow. Tomorrow night, upper 40s to near 50 for lows. And then we'll start our warm-up the rest of the week. Low 80s on Wednesday, mid 80s on Thursday, upper 80s on Friday, and we're back into the 90s as we head into the weekend. So the heat does return as we head into the upcoming weekend.
What is your certified weather day? You should get a car wash on this day of the week.
Oh, one of us would like to take his pickup or his car for a car wash.
Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday.
And then it's going to rain again. So what's the point?
I was hoping he was just going to say it was like Tuesday, so I could be like, oh, it's going to rain Wednesday.
So I'm
I would. Yeah, if that was the case, I'd be washing my car every day.
I appreciate you asking, and I love the fact that you're taking such good care of the new to you car that you're like, hey, I should go get this washed. You're talking to somebody who doesn't wash her pickup from Thanksgiving to Easter because why? It's just going to get messy. So the look on your face.
I paid for sparkly paint. I want to see it sparkle.
All right, we're going to remember that. Okay, sparkly paint for Addison.
That's the whole everything about that car. I hit a speed bump when I was in Omaha a couple months ago, and you better believe I paid for the whole suspension. I used the whole suspension on that one.
So speaking of, using the whole thing that you've paid for, etc. Interesting discussion here of a recent story with a farmer out of the Finger Lakes region in New York State. Lynn Hoskins, he and his brother farm, and they had rented a 300-acre parcel of land for, since the 70s, right? And in 2009, the landlord wanted to sell it. And he gave them the heads up that an adjacent landowner had been rather difficult in regards to property lines. There is a 2.5-acre farmyard, and it's fronted by the highway, surrounded then on 3 sides by the Hoskins farmland. And so they thought, no problem. We'll be able to work on this together. It'll be okay. The homeowner of the 2.5-acre lot had a garden that was always adjacent to the field. And every year, foot by foot, the garden got bigger. Then a fence went up. Then a greenhouse showed up. And then trees were being planted on the farmland. And it's now a 60-foot intrusion into their 300 acres. To which the farmer, Lynn, okay, this shouldn't be a bad deal, right? He sent a letter to the homeowner insisting on the removal of these items. And by the way, they can see the stakes, the surveyor's stakes for the property line. And it was clear that the homeowner was over the property line based on the surveyor's stakes. The farmer has been paying taxes on it, maintaining it, and has the deed to the land. And when he sent the letter, the homeowner said, nuts to you, don't care. Squatter's rights. I got it. So it's called adverse possession. We always call it just squatter's rights. And it's a doctrine allowing a trespasser to gain legal title to property depending on what's considered a rat's nest of criteria that can vary from state to state. And so the farmer made an offer to the landowner. He said, look, so far I'm in for $75,000 in attorney's fees to try to fight this deal. How about we just go ahead, you take out the trees, the garden can stay at its present size until either you sell this property or die, basically, and you're going to need to pay me $250 a year in rent, right, to prevent an adverse possession claim in the future. Homeowner says, no, I want the land. So it went to court here at the end of July. I do not have the update on what would have happened, but that's literally squatters' rights at work on farmland, which is unusual.
Interesting.
You're looking at me like you can't wait to put this into practice somehow, Addison.
I just don't get it. Why do people got to be like this?
Right. Yep. So it's just continual encroachment and taking over that farmland.
Not to that degree of legal action having been taken, but my parents actually had something very similar to them happen at their current house where they live now. When they moved in, the farmer, their whole house is surrounded by farm field. Farmer was like right there on the side of the house. And then they discovered that they finally looked at like the deed to the land and they were like, oh, he should be like 300 feet, like
the
way
other
over
way.
that way. So like
Yeah.
now when I drive by their house, they've just got this big giant yard now.
Yeah, more land.
Just
And
a huge yard compared to what it was.
know your property rights, know your boundaries. And when you are buying a piece of land, if you are told, we've had some trouble with property lines within this situation, probably don't just let that ride. Get that scoped out right off the bat. On a positive note, the North Dakota Soybean Council has elected their executive committee for the coming year. Evan Montgomery of Grand Forks is chairman. Ted Brandt of Enderlin is vice chair. Jeremiah Undum of Oaks is the secretary. And Dallas Loff of Wahpeton has been elected treasurer. Also, the Soybean Growers Association in North Dakota put together their executive committee. And Chris McDonald of Leonard is currently going to serve as president. Stephanie Cook of Davenport, vice president. Josh Gackle of Cullum, secretary, and Todd Stutzrud of Barton, close to Willow City, has been elected as treasurer. Congratulations to all of them. Thanks for the work that you do as you lead the soybean growing efforts across the state of North Dakota, representing all growers and making sure to use the checkoff dollars to fund research and so much more within the state and further to develop markets for our soybeans. And again, that research also helps us understand ways that we can be using soybeans in better situations in field as well. When we return from the livestock report with the American Ag Network, we will be joined by our guest. We're going to have Scott Heiberger. We're going to talk about kids' farm safety today and probably agritourism safety as well. So we'll touch on all of that when we return. For those of you who maybe got more than the 20 drops of rain that I did today, we'd love to hear from you. And you can call us on the JLA Insurance phone line. That number is 701-293-9000. And again, Nate Thorsrud, he's a farmer too. So if you have questions about insurance that affects your farm, he's a great person to talk with. You can be watching us on the Lighthouse Commodities live stream out there on Facebook, YouTube, and Acres TV. That way you can see our guests, you can see the links that we show, and so much more that is going on during the show today. And lastly, a big thank you to Geronimo Power being a part of our Flag Farmer program, and Landmark Companies. We'll be joined later this week by Blake Sunday of Landmark Companies for the Drainage Difference. We want to talk about what's going on in drainage all around the farm, on your fields, and so much more. But first, we are joined by Scott Heiberger. He is here to talk about kids farm safety and agritourism safety, which those two things can go together or not. So let's start with you, Scott. Just fill us in on your background, who you are and what you do. It's not your first go around with us here.
Thanks. Yeah, Scott Heiberger, Communication Manager, National Farm Medicine Center, and we're part of Marshfield Clinic Research Institute. National Farm Medicine Center has been around since 1981. It grew out of the idea that, there are injuries and illnesses particular to farmers and farm workers. And so we just kind of formalized that. And we do research outreach related to ag safety.
We appreciate all the work that you do, and especially when it comes to what's going on with kids on the farm, because that's a big deal. One thing I'm always very happy to see, more and more often, kids wearing high visibility clothing, which, okay, I was a kid once on the farm. That didn't seem very cool. But that's not really what it's about anymore, is it?
Well, that's a real simple tool that farmers can use, and it's inexpensive, and it reinforces the awareness. Kids watch what we do, they model our behavior. And so if we're doing safety conscious things, we're putting our ear protection in, we're wearing high vis vests, hopefully that makes it a little easier for the kids. And, as far as just being visible, especially coming up on a very busy fall harvest time of year, and anything we can do to keep those kids visible is excellent. It reminds me that as we get ready for fall, we encourage farmers and farm parents to think of kids in two different groups, those that are working and those that are not working. Those that are working, it's important to assign appropriate tasks so that they can be successful and be safe. And for that, they can visit our cultivatesafety.org resource. And we have tips on about 50 or so guidelines, actually not even tips. It's a sheet that farm parents can go through and answer the questions on there. And by doing that, it really looks at each child's developmental levels. And then the parents can decide, or the employer of youth can decide, if they're ready for a certain job or not. Then you have the non-working kids. And that's where the high vis vests also come in handy. More than half of all injuries to children on farms are, in fact, to children who are not working. They're just there. They're hanging out. Their parents are trying to keep an eye on them while they're busy doing something else. So the other thing heading into fall, would be, if possible, to try to line up some kind of a childcare arrangement, a babysitting situation where, at least for the very dangerous work, most hazardous work, that hopefully those kids can be out of that very busy work site.
And Scott, do we have any stats? I mean, a lot of it sounds like the parents just aren't watching their kids if the kids are getting away and getting into some mischief.
You don't know how fast they are.
Oh, I know. Believe me, I know. But do we have any stats on what percentage of these kids are getting injured on farms? And if so, what's the main cause of their injuries?
Yeah, supervision is one thing. And as a parent who raised a couple boys, I'm not going to sit in judgment of any other parents.
Right.
So
yeah, no, I hear you.
and neither does our center. But we do feel it's important to point out that, like you just said, it happens in a blink of an eye. I just turned around. I just left for a second. That's classic. So yeah, we do encourage to try to keep the very young kids out of the busy work site. And as far as numbers, the best estimates are about every day 33 kids are injured on farms enough that requires medical attention.
Wow.
And probably about every 3 days, a child dies in some sort of ag-related incident, working or non-working. And as far as main causes, supervision is something that can hopefully preempt a lot of those injuries, and just things that you'd expect. Machinery is a big one. Animal injuries are another one, and drowning as well would be on that list.
And when we think about drowning, that would include not only stock ponds, water tanks, but there are times if you have open lagoons like manure pits and so forth. We have seen that where both kids and adults, and kids are curious, right? Because we had an open lagoon pit for our dairy farm when I was a kid growing up, and like the solids will float to the top, and it looks like you could walk across it like it's solid, but it is not.
Yeah.
And if a kid crawls out there and wants to and thinks that they can get across it, that would result in a drowning, more than likely.
Yep, that would be in that category, or if it's a little partially frozen, absolutely. And,
Yeah.
So many things, and I appreciate you having me on this time of year because you mentioned agritourism, and agritourism is such a great celebration of agriculture. And I'm fortunate in an area of Wisconsin. I drive by a couple dairies that you can buy the cheese at the retail store and then look through the glass and see some of the cows that produce the milk for that cheese. I drive by a winery. I drive by a really nice U-pick raspberry
Farm.
operation overlooking a lake. I mean, just phenomenal. So these are just obviously great for agriculture, and a good time of year to talk about agritourism, safe agritourism. And man, do we have resources. If you're involved with having people out at your farm, we've got a bunch of stuff that can help you out. I don't know if you want to narrow this down in any way, but I can babble about agritourism for sure.
I think we want to talk about some of that. And then before we end today, because we've still got time, we're going to come back after our news break. I know you mentioned that your staff is going to be at Farm Fest this week over in Minnesota. So we're going to want to make sure to highlight that for folks. But back to the agritourism for a minute. Dean, you had a question just before we started. Do kids get injured in those situations?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I mean, and again, I think it comes, like Scott said, it comes down to, the parents' supervision a lot of times.
Yep.
Yeah.
Or if you're with a field group, et cetera. But there are things that you do as the producer to make sure that if you have people coming to your farm, kids or adults, because adults are just as curious and don't know the background, I think there's a lot of things that you have to plan for there.
Now, question there, Scott. So when there are injuries, and I know each instance is probably different, but are the owners of the farm liable for any injuries that occur with these kids on their property?
Terrific question, and I'll preface by saying I'm not an insurance agent. However, a number of states, including Minnesota and Wisconsin, off the top of my head, have limited liability laws, and any operator who's going to have people out on their place are going to want to take a look at that. In a nutshell, I think the gist of these laws are each of those states, and again, there's more, I'm sure, have some language on a sign or a placard, and it states in so many words that there are inherent risks being out in a place like this. There's weather, there's animal behavior, et cetera, but that this operation is following best practices. So it's particularly worded by the state, and it doesn't obviously cover conditions or situations of negligence, but at least provides some safety net so that agritourism operators who are well-meaning, who are trying to follow the best practices, still have some level of liability protection. But I noticed University of Minnesota Extension has a outstanding page on agritourism and insurance. Answers a lot of questions. Our Safe Agritourism website has a section on insurance as well. And really the bottom line there is your insurance that you may have for your farm may not cover agritourism operations, may not cover things when you have people out to your farm. So really, really super important to sit down with your insurance agent. The Safe Agritourism site that I mentioned that we facilitate even has a page that has insurance discussion sheet. So you can go through, it's got bullet points, and when you sit down with your insurance agent, this insurance discussion sheet can help you ask all the right questions to make sure you're covered.
Those are big questions to ask. And again, checking on your insurance coverage when you begin an agritourism site is probably the first thing on a checklist. But there's more, and there's lots of checklists that Scott's going to be able to share with us as far as resources. We will do that when we return after the news. We're talking about safety today. And safety online can't be overlooked, whether it's for your kids and really for your own business. Just this morning, I had a conversation with a veterinarian in Georgia, and he talked about the fact that he had a veterinarian friend in North Carolina who was thinking his bank had called and he was answering the questions from the main branch or the main office, not his branch bank. Found out it was the hackers, and he gave him enough information that he lost $98,000.
Oh.
So he thought he was really protected because cyber insurance could come into play. He bought some, but he was asked to read the fine print because in all likelihood, it will only help him with a slight amount of recovery, and his bank will not give money back on that situation. How can you avoid it? You talk to folks like Tech Support Farm, and you make sure that you have walked through tightening your security, having good practices so that you know when someone calls whether or not they're legit, and then also reviewing those cybersecurity or those cyber insurance policies very closely. You can do that with the Fence Check Assessment at techsupport.farm. It becomes more and more critical as we see more dollars floating around electronically, and as we see farmers receiving government payments, you are being targeted, so pay close attention. Let's return to our conversation with Scott Heiberger. He is here to talk about safety with agritourism. And so when I go to your website, Scott, one of the things that I see is just so many resources and checklists. What are some of the things that you have available that people might not realize are a great resource from you?
Yeah, and a little background on that. We try to be supportive as possible for folks that are opening their operations to agritourism. South Dakota State just did a study and they surveyed agritourism operators, and the three big challenges that came out from that survey expressed by these agritourism operators were a lack of business management training and training in insurance issues, government relations, and time restraints. I'm happy to say that this Safe Agritourism, all one word, Safe Agritourism website tries to address those things. And one of the ways we address that, like you said, is with checklists. It's broken down into topics where, for instance, you have checklists that every operation will want to touch base with: emergency prep and planning, traffic and parking, hand washing, things like that. And then there are some other checklists that are more specific to the operation. So if you have a corn maze, there's a corn maze checklist, hayride checklist, 10 or 12 of those. So you can kind of tailor it. And, one of the things you're mentioning potential safety issues for children regarding agritourism operations. It's not just the people that visit. It's not just the young people who visit. It's also the young people that work there. And so you want to make sure they're well trained. And for instance, one of the checklists we have is employee safety orientation. Is your new employee encouraged to report hazards? Is there an environment of, sharing information so that we can be a better, safer operation? Have they been educated about, the basics of animal disease transmission, et cetera? So, go ahead.
I really like those, Scott. First of all, if you're running an agritourism site, and we have talked to lots of operators, folks with some of the world's largest corn mazes, you pick strawberries, petting zoos, et cetera, and you don't have to create this checklist yourself. It's been there. 14-year-old me, had I been an employee at a agritourism site in charge of a hayride, pretty sure I needed that checklist in an employee orientation. I'm not so sure I'd have been the best candidate for safety measures at my point in time.
You're 100% correct. And 2 autumns ago, I think last fall was fairly quiet, but of course 2 falls ago, we had the incident in Augustana where a 13-year-old boy, he was a scarer, I believe, on a hayride, horror hayride type of thing, and got run over and died of head injuries. So
yes.
I don't have all the facts of that. I wasn't there, but anything we can do to try to head off stuff like that. And then the other one I think of was in Chippewa County, Wisconsin, the same fall, about a month earlier, when you had a wagon overturn. There's a best practices on hayride safety, and one of the things they say there is just pull one wagon at a time. In that particular case, Chippewa County, they had 2. They're coming down a very slight incline, but the one jackknifed, and this is a headline that an operator doesn't want: 25 people injured on your hayride, and you've got the drone overhead, and you're on the nightly news, and besides feeling bad about the people who were hurt, that's publicity you don't want. And in that case, there were 3 life-threatening injuries on that hayride overturn. It was very little tiny kids. But the good news is, as we're talking about here, there are checklists, there are virtual walkthroughs for fencing, all types of things. You can see a typical fence. They'll ask you a question: do you think this is safe? Will this keep kids out? You answer yes or no. Depending on your answer, they'll give you more information and direct you to different resources. So just a ton of one-stop, even signs, printing out signs, hand washing station, corn maze entrance this way. Like you said, no need to repeat the process and reinvent the wheel. Folks can just print these signs out as they are and laminate them and slap them right up.
We have lots of like you pick pumpkins and flower organizations, that are happening right now. Right, you're out in you're out in the fields. Some of those you pick pumpkins, they're going to be ready soon. They border pastures. And don't forget, even though that's not your designated point of agritourism, someone's going to get curious and want to walk over and look at your livestock. Just so you know, geese bite, ducks chase, turkeys don't like you and they'll flap at you. And cows, if they're not familiar with you, they're not as docile as you might think. So when you mention signs, Scott, it's some of those types of things, or just giving an orientation when visitors get to your farm. And what are the things you should tell them?
Well, those types of things. In fact, there's a sign that says animals may bite. I mean, we've tried to think of everything here. Geese may hiss at you and chase you. The quick orientation and, certainly do an orientation, but signs are great because you get oriented, you're excited to get in there, you're only half paying attention to what you hear. But if there's a sign, in particular key areas, that's always a good idea.
And put them at kid height.
And the supervision ratio,
Yeah.
the chaperone, make sure that whatever the ratio is. In fact, I think there's a developmental child development chart in this agritourism website somewhere that recommends, depending on the age, how many chaperones should be, per number of students.
The interactive walkthroughs are great because you can look at what practices are better than others and what you might be doing as well. So just as you mentioned, Scott, that's a big help. And then there are resources and the signs, the policies, logs. So you can have folks signing in and out depending on their duties as employees, as volunteers. Everyone needs to be aware of those things because there's more danger than somebody might have slipped on the rungs of the ladder climbing up the combine. There's a lot more dangers. And we want people to be protected. We want them to be safe. And we want agriculture to have the most positive name in the industry, right? We don't want people to be scared and shy of it. Scott,
100%.
As we start to wind down, I do want to ask, you made mention in your email that there are some things going on at Farm Fest. Your team is going to be located, I believe you said, at the pavilion. And what might they be highlighting there as well for listeners?
Yeah, our very good friends and colleagues at the University of Minnesota. It's the Upper Midwest Agricultural Safety and Health Center, UMash. They're going to be at Farm Fest in Redwood County starting tomorrow. And for 3 days, they'll be in the Farm Safety and Wellness Pavilion. In the past, they've had an ATV tilt thing that you can get on and sort of feel what that's like and what it feels like to start to lose it. They have some other interactive safety demonstrations there. I don't know what all they have in store this year for those types of surprises, but again, it's the Farm Safety and Wellness Pavilion at Minnesota Farm Fest this Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. Say hello to our friends from UMash.
Well, also Secretary Brooke Rollins with USDA is going to be there on Tuesday morning at 10:10 a.m. at Farm Fest. I hope someone in the Secret Service picked up a checklist from UMash so that they understand crowd control and what happens at a farm show.
Well done. I like that.
Scott, thank you for your time today. What a great reminder at this time of the year. We greatly appreciate it.
Thanks so much.
Thanks, Scott. And when we come back, we're going to recap the weather. What are our chances for severe weather, and what's the time frame on that? And what about the rest of the week? We'll have all those details coming up after the break. And welcome back to Weather and Ag in Focus, 1:50 in the afternoon. Temperatures outside, 80 degrees here at the studio, but temperatures up north only in the low to mid-60s in the northern valley due to cloud cover and still some scattered showers, mainly now north of Thief River Falls, moving northeastward. And again, we'll be watching radar for more thunderstorms to develop along that front after 6 o'clock tonight. So kind of be weather aware. There is a chance for severe weather, with the main threat being the possibility of large hail. Could we see an isolated tornado? Possibly. I think that'll be south of the FM area and east if that was to occur. But something we'll be keeping an eye on. So, again, be weather aware this evening between 6 o'clock and 10 o'clock, or 6 and 11, that 4 to 5 hour window when we could see those storms develop along that front. But out ahead of it, we should warm up here in the FM area and point southward into about the mid-80s today, with south winds about 10 to 20. And then those storms occur this evening on that cold front. They're out of here by midnight, and we'll drop off into the upper 50s with winds turning to the north at 10 to 20, and a breezy, refreshing day. That's the best way to describe tomorrow. Highs in the low to mid-70s tomorrow, with winds out of the west at about 10 to 20, and then down into the upper 40s to near 50 tomorrow night, and then low 80s on Wednesday, upper 80s on Thursday and Friday, and we should be back into the 90s for the upcoming weekend. So at least we'll see a little bit of a break, and then back into more of that heat. But I mean, if you have weekends off, and we've had a stretch of some really nice hot summer weekends, which a lot of people love. It's lake time, it's vacation time, whatever. We've been lucky. If you don't mind the summer heat, it's been really nice on the weekends.
My lawn is as crunchy as AstroTurf.
That's the only bad part. Yeah, I know.
It's a little loud out there, actually.
I wish we had better news in the forecast. At least there's some rain in it, but it's not enough to really help things out.
We're just at that point.
Yeah,
we're there.
Exactly.
Now, if it starts pouring rain while we try to harvest a mediocre crop, there's going to be some anger.
Oh, yeah. I can imagine.
So
let's hope we can time that out a little better.
All right. Speaking of timing things out, questions that people have, et cetera, this came to us earlier today, and there's a headline that 1,000 head of cattle have died in northeast South Dakota due to the heat. So let's analyze this just a little bit. Death loss in cattle is not a surprise. That happens during hot stretches. About 4 years ago, it happened earlier in the season, which was very unusual that we were hitting triple-digit numbers on feedlots in like June, right? And the fat cattle coming in off pasture and so forth were wholly unprepared for that because it was too warm and they had heavy hides. What we're facing right now is you have a number of dark-hided cattle that are standing out in the sunshine. They're trying to get to as much shade as they can, but 300 head can't fit under a tree, so you got to wait your turn. Some of the water sources are drying up, so they're not able to get into the water to cool that they might always do. They're certainly consuming a lot more water, and we've had a number of stock tanks and stock dams that have dried up. When you look at 1,000 head overall, and this was specific to South Dakota, their total number of beef animals is 3.5 million. So is 1,000 head a lot? Every time you lose an animal, it's a lot. Mm-hmm. But if you do the math on it, which this is weather and ag, not weather and math, you can do the percentage of what you think that loss looks like. Producers don't want to lose animals, especially right now when we see high market prices. It's not their highest, but they've been really good. And the ranchers are doing everything they can to mitigate that heat, but you can't turn down the humidity, you can't turn down the heat, and you can't turn up the wind when you need it. And the cattle need the lower humidity. They need cooler temperatures at night to cool off, and they need a breeze. And we haven't always been getting those, especially even at night.
Right.
So we've had quite the growing conditions on an overnight situation as of late as well.
It's just been one of those hotter than normal summers, and unfortunately, you're going to get the repercussions from that as well.
I talked to a rancher from Wyoming recently, and he said his dad is still alive. He's in his 90s, and his dad mentioned that this was worse than the 1950s drought that Wyoming saw.
Wow.
When we think about our most recent drought here in North Dakota, we think about 88 and 89. Mm-hmm. That was not pleasant. But also, as I've read back, some of the higher drought areas were the 20s, was the 50s, the 30s. I mean, you can kind of find a cycle in there where you look at this dry weather, and that's not a surprise.
Yeah, unfortunately, and with El Nino going on, that doesn't help either as we go into the fall and winter in terms of needed moisture.
Currently, El Nino is causing problems in a very different way for ports. We got the whole disaster going on over there with Iran and Strait of Hormuz, whatever you're calling it today. And when you think about Panama, due to El Nino and a lower rainfall, they are now in a situation where they don't have enough water to run the locks to move boats through the Panama Canal.
Oh,
I read that just this morning, that's affecting them.
How would that affect ag? There's quite a bit of
we move grain
produce
and product through there.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
So there are times that we need that if we're depending on the ports we're loading to. So that just affects global trade. Can you still go all the way around South America? Sure, but your transportation costs just went up significantly in that situation. The Farm, Food, and National Security Act of 2026, known as FARMS, this includes the Farmer Assistance, Resilient, and Mental Health Evaluation. And it's an amendment which directs the U.S. Department of Ag to have the Farm and Ranch Stress Assistant Network, and they are supposed to study the availability and use of mental health services amongst farmers and ranchers, ag professionals, and then bring those findings back to Congress. It's important to understand what this means in practical terms. It's a study. This is a directive to look carefully, get data, and report back on what farm families actually need and cannot currently access. And it reauthorizes the Farm and Ranch Stress Assistant Network and includes broader provisions that would support rural telehealth programs with the priority on mental health and behavioral health services. So these are steps forward. It does not mean that funding has been approved and that we have the opportunity to do some of those things. Recently, I've been contacted by a graduate student at North Dakota State University who wants to examine this, but then specifically its impact on men in rural areas. So I'm not sure why he called me. Maybe he thought my name was, Richard, but I'll do my best to direct him to the right places and see if I can help him out. But the conversation really matters in our rural communities because we can no longer just say we can be self-reliant and that everything's going to be fine, shake off the bad days. The stress levels continue to soar. Prime example, at Ag PhD Field Day last Thursday, I was moderating one of the panels that was talking about the transition of farms to the next generation. And we had 3 generational farmers, young kids under 30, talking about it. And there was a gentleman who came up afterwards and he said, how do I have this conversation? Do I bring my kids into it when right now my wife and I can't decide? And with tears in his eyes, he said, it's so hard. I might not make any decisions because I don't want to fight with my wife, and then I don't want to fight with my kids about what's fair and what's not. So this poor fellow, I feel for him in so many ways, and I don't know what his solution will be. I gave him some resources that will hopefully help, but it is a true conversation. When you have worked your whole life to build your farm up, and now you don't know what's going to happen to it in the future, that leaves a big hole.
No doubt about it. Well, that'll do it for today's edition of Weather and Ag in Focus. I want to thank everybody for joining us. Don't go anywhere just yet, though. The Jay Thomas Show is coming up next.